So I'm going to move us along to our next keynote speakers. There's a panel of 3, and they'll give a presentation on our communities, our Bay. So the first keynote speaker is Gabrielle Wong-Parodi from the Stanford University. Gabrielle is an assistant professor in the departments of Earth Science, System Science, and the Environmental Social Sciences, and Center Fellow at the Stanford Woods Institute for the Environment. Dr. Wong-Parodi seeks to understand the psychosocial and contextual factors that influence people's responses to environmental change, it's specifically extremes over time, with a focus on historically marginalized or disproportionately impacted communities. Dr. Wong-Parodi received her Bachelor's in Science in Psychology at the University of California, Berkeley, and her MA and PhD in Risk Perceptions and Communication from the University of California, Berkeley. Cannedy from Climate Resilient Communities. Cade is the Director of Programs at Climate Resilient Communities. Before joining in 2021, he worked as a Research and Communications Fellow at the California Environmental Justice Alliance. Cade graduated from Stanford University with an MA in Communications and a Bachelor's of Arts in Political Science, focusing throughout his education on air quality and environmental justice. Cade grew up in the unincorporated community of El Prado in northern New Mexico. From a young age, he saw the communities around him, collaborated to share water and struggle for environmental justice against a Chevron-owned mine. He believes in pairing collaborative, community-driven solutions to the climate crisis with advocacy for the large structural changes required to solve the roots of the climate crisis. And lastly, Ana Ángel Avendaño from El Concilio of San Mateo County. Ana is a first-generation Chicana Latina born in the Bay Area and raised between borders. Her childhood experiences in Michoacán, Mexico, not only shaped her identity, but her everyday work as a community leader, working alongside the immigrant community and underserved populations. Ana has worked both in the public and nonprofit sector with youth and community development programs in leadership, advocacy, and cultural awareness. Ana joined El Concilio of San Mateo County in June 2022 as the new executive director. Ana has a master's in Chicano Studies from San Jose State and a bachelor's in Ethnic Studies from CSU East Bay, where she's also an adjunct faculty in the same department. We welcome them virtually. Thank you.
Can you all hear me? Great. Hello, everyone. Thank you for those great introductions. Thank you to all the speakers who spoke before us. My name is Cade. I'm the Director of Programs with Climate Resilient Communities. We're an environmental justice organization that works mostly in San Mateo, Santa Clara counties with frontline communities that are really going to be the first to be affected by the climate crisis. We work in Belhaven, North Fair Oaks, and East Palo Alto, and also a bit in Santa Clara County. Let me go to the next slide. I wanted to start by just kind of situating us all with respect to the communities that we are talking about and working in. East Palo Alto, Belhaven are, some of the last enclaves of minority communities in the Bay Area. They're communities that struggle with, poverty and with a lot of the legacies of racialized zoning practices, redlining, and the environmental hazards that kind of accumulate with those histories of neglect and disinvestment. You can see the housing burden, the pollution burden, and poverty all kind of intersect. They're co-reinforcing issues, and they're also all solved fundamentally by our work together in communities, and that's why I'm really excited to talk about this project. You can go to the next slide too. So one example of kind of the disproportionate environmental burdens our community face is really apparent in the canopy cover and the distribution of heat in summer. You can see there on the left the disparate canopy coverage across several communities. North Fair Oaks is a really important example as well. It's bordered by one of the most wealthy zip codes in the entire United States, Atherton. And the heat distribution between Atherton and the further reaches of Fair Oaks can be more than 10 degrees at times on hot days. And before I hand it over to Anna to talk a little bit about our project's priorities, our shared values and goals, I think there was one thing that I wanted to emphasize, which is that there's been a long kind of history of extractive research, extractive engagement, both from local governments, state governments, and research institutions between these communities. East Palo Alto and Stanford have a long history, and it's one that's not necessarily been most positive for the community in a lot of instances. And that's why I really respect Dr. Wong-Parodi for embarking on an effort that was really collaborative from the very jump. It was co-creation of research, started almost 5 years ago now, this project called Our Communities, Our Bay. And I think that, that kind of co-productive process is not just, the most just way to structure research and engagement. It also produces better scientific outcomes. I think one clear example of that, I remember back in 2020, because it was towards the middle end of the pandemic, quote unquote end. It was one of those like crests of the waves that were starting to fall, and we thought it was good to meet together again. So we met outside, and we're talking with residents, community members, people in our organizations about the project, about the research, and we were talking in particular about a survey that we wanted to administer. And one of the questions that we're going to ask folks is, was centered on their household income. I mean, that's a very common question that folks get, across different research projects is, what is the household income? But immediately one of the residents in our communities spoke up and said that we have such an extreme housing burden here. We have intergenerational families. We have oftentimes 3 families that can live in a house, multiple people contributing to the household to make the financials work. So what does it really mean when we talk about a household income? And if we had proceeded without that kind of knowledge from the community, we would have gotten incorrect information. We would have gotten scientific outcomes that did not accord with the reality or the experience of people in our communities. But with that clarification, with that fundamental kind of community-driven insight that took place before we even started collecting data, when we were still trying to define the questions we were looking to ask, that's something that's going to produce a better scientific outcome, something that better reflects our society, our communities, and better answers the questions that we're looking to answer. So with that, I'll turn it over to Anna to talk a little bit more about the shared values and goals and kind of what makes this process work.
Thank you, Cade. So at El Concilio, we are a safety net navigator in the community. We provide one-on-one assistance to families and individuals. I'm actually in the office, so you might hear some echoes. That's our staff working very closely with the client. So our role in the community has really led us to be involved in various environmental justice and climate justice initiatives, and one of them is Our Communities, Our Bay. So for El Concilio, when we look to partner with other organizations, we always look for value alignment. And I think that as a community-based organization, that is our responsibility. It is our duty to the community. We are in service for them. So we really look for partnerships that are going to benefit them in the long run. And how do we find if they're going to be beneficial? We really look for building relationships. So really getting to know our partners and look for their intentions, both personally, at the personal level, and also the professional level. So this was really clear from the beginning with working with climate resilient communities and Gabrielle and her team. We knew that at the very beginning there was value alignment, and we all had the goal to really be committed and had passion for putting our community's needs first, and that the project was going to have a long, sustainable impact on children, adults, and families. Next slide, please. And our mission in El Concilio really lives through our values, like I mentioned, and all of our partnerships need to represent these values: inclusion, advocate for change, social justice, cultural integrity, and collaboration. And I can definitely confidently say that Our Communities, Our Bay represents all of these values. And and again, I see that as our role as a community partner, we really, as a Concilio, and our role in this project is really to hold us accountable and to make sure that every step of the way in the project, we are living through our values. And we also make sure, for example, are we advocating for change with this project, and how are we being inclusive? Who's at the table? How can we invite them? Just like Cade represented with the example of asking the community partners from the very beginning to be involved at all different levels. And can go to the next slide. So our project is being conducted in 3 phases, and the main objective is to evaluate the effectiveness of interventions on reducing wildfire smoke exposure and health risks in low-income and hard-to-reach communities in California. Gabrielle will go more into details on each of these phases, but you will see that the community was very much part of the process throughout. So I'll hand it over to Gabrielle.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And really, as we look to the timeline of when this project began, you can see the depth of the partnerships that we have. So the partnerships were born out of conversations we had with El Concilio and climate resilient communities through interactions with the course that I was co-teaching with colleagues, which really centers on practice, research, and education. And through this course, teams of students work on projects with community partners that are really driven by what communities say that they need. And way back in 2019, this is actually when I first started at Stanford, we started having conversations about air quality. And so this was even before some of the really horrific historic wildfires that we had been experiencing started to occur. But some wildfires had already started happening, and we were impacted, our communities were impacted by wildfire smoke. And the question was, well, what is the indoor air quality like in our communities? We know that, for example, purple air sensors that provide data that are publicly available tend to be located in more affluent communities, but we really don't know what's going on in the communities that we are working with. And so we were also interested in understanding, well, how about some of the projects that CRC and El Concilio are doing around energy efficiency? How might that have co-benefits in terms of improving indoor air quality? And so that got us started thinking about doing a project together that was focused on air quality. And so we developed an app, which is the precursor to the Our Communities app, which we're using for the study that we're doing right now, which were informed by 3 interview studies that were basically involved talking to members of the community, finding out how people were coping with indoor air quality issues, with wildfire smoke, thinking through potential strategies, both at the level of the individual and household, as well as community level strategies that we might take, for example, to mitigate exposure to wildfire smoke. So for example, clean air centers. And then we started to together go after funding. So this project is funded through multiple sources, including the Environmental Protection Agency, including the National Science Foundation, including some funding that ultimately comes from the National Institutes of Health to develop this project. And basically, this project is proceeding in 3 phases. We've already gone through 2 phases where we have co-identified and we've developed interventions together. One intervention are messages that are delivered through the app that we have developed, which can be shown in the native language of the user. So they can select, I want to see the information from the app in Spanish, or in Tongan, or in Samoan, or in English. And then we have some other sorts of interventions. So for example, we're using air cleaners to clean particulate matter from the air. So what we did after co-identifying and developing those interventions, including survey instruments, etc., we did a pilot study in 2022, working with project ambassadors following a promotores model of having community members who are recruiting their neighbors, their friends, their family members, people in their social network to participate in this study and to really help us in this particular phase understand, is the recruitment protocol going well? Are we asking the right questions? Like Cade mentioned, we really gained amazing insight with respect to what questions to ask. Are we asking the right questions? Are the interventions we're considering actually appropriate for the community? So that really informed ultimately the larger study, which we are right now in, which is the third phase. And so just quickly to show, we ultimately, this is a randomized controlled trial field experiment, a longitudinal study where we're going to be following people over the course of a couple of wildfire seasons, 4 different conditions where we have some combination of our interventions. I'm not sure here if you can see my mouse moving. So interventions delivered through the smartphone app, air cleaners. And we're also assessing what people's actual exposure is. So here we're using purple air sensors to collect information about their indoor air quality, as well as sleep mats, which give us an indication of the development of chronic illness over time. And so we're going to be doing a series of measurements, both at enrollment and also annually. And I believe we have 315 households that are now enrolled in our longitudinal full-scale study. And here are some of the things that we're assessing: housing and household characteristics, whether or not households are enrolled in weatherization programs, access to healthcare, the type of equipment that people already have in their homes, their behaviors, and mental and physical health. And we also are able to implement surveys in real time as events are unfolding using the app that we developed, the Our Communities app, which provides people not only with information about the exposures for air quality, but also heat. It also allows us to collect information. So, for example, we can push surveys out through this app. So here we're assessing exposure-related behaviors, mental and physical health, indoor and outdoor particulate matter, temperature and humidity. For a subset of our households, we are also planning on assessing personal particulate matter exposure in their microenvironment. So this means we can assess exposure through a wearable device at home, but also at work, in transit, at school, what have you. And also, as I mentioned before, we're assessing sleep quality. So we hope to field this study, and also we're being very flexible and nimble. As we had the series of atmospheric rivers occurring last year, we developed a flood survey that we could ask people, and it looks like maybe we should be fielding some of those surveys now as we're experiencing these atmospheric rivers again. But we're really learning as we go. And as Cade mentioned, and as Anna mentioned, because this has been a process of co-production, because we are implementing a field study in the context of people's real lives, we are not only going to contribute through this rigorous, robust study design that we have, we're also able to nimbly and with some agility ask questions that are pertinent to what the community is facing in real time as these types of events are unfolding. Okay. So here I just want to acknowledge all of the amazing support that we have from a range of agencies and institutions. And we also have a QR code here. We have a website. If people are interested in learning more about the project, please feel free to go visit that. And so with some concluding thoughts, I'll turn it back over to Cade.
Yeah, thank you all for listening to our presentation. I think we're really excited about the scientific opportunities that this holds, but I think what both El Concilio and CRC have been really focused on from the beginning is that, and something that I think really makes our collaboration really successful is its commitment to, materially improving the lives of our residents immediately. Oftentimes, research or planning processes can, be very removed from kind of a real life implementation. You can do a planning project and you won't see results for 5 or 10 years. A lot of research, it can be the same way. And I think that if we are really taking the concerns of our community seriously, if we're really understanding the threats that extreme heat, that poor air quality, that flood exposure, if we're really taking those seriously as threats that are already impacting the lives of our residents, then it demands action now. It's not something that can wait another 10 years to be addressed. We know that there are things that we can do right now to address these conditions for our residents. And what makes this project successful is that we've been able to integrate those immediate responses, those material improvements to people's lives from the very jump. And that's something that also contributes to buy-in in the project. I think people are a lot more willing to participate, to recruit their neighbors and their friends if they see that this isn't just another project where folks kind of parachute in, collect research, and then jump away and you never hear from them again. This is something that's fundamentally, it's interested in the science, it's examining these things, it's making, novel research, but it's also something that's addressing the problems now. And I think that combination of action and research and planning is something that everyone in the academic community and everyone involved in government planning should be doing, because it's kind of what is demanded of someone who takes the climate crisis and environmental justice seriously. So I think that's what makes our project a success, and that's why I'm really happy to be part of this team and happy to be able to talk to you all today. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much to the three of you, and my hats off to your project. It's amazing, and thank you for sharing all of your lessons learned and community partnerships in research and action and the importance of not parachuting in. I think want to pass it to the audience for last few questions, or virtual, if we have any questions. I think we do. Do we have any questions virtual? No? Okay. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you to our keynote speakers for sharing knowledge all the way from what community science and co-production means, from traditional knowledge and honoring and respecting tribal knowledge as science, and to our last keynote speakers for really shining a light on how effective partnerships in research can lead to action. And so with that, I'll pass it back to our moderator for our next section. Thank you.